Is another coalition pact on the horizon? Well, 5 political parties met this week to engage in discussions to discuss coalitions and try to find a plausible model for working together going into the election. Build One South Africa, COPE, the African People's Convention, IRM and ARM say they will continue to invite other like-minded formations to join them ahead of the 2024 poll. We take a look at the prospects of success for these political parties. We're now joined by political analyst Professor Andre Duvenhage. Thank you very much, Prof, for your time this morning. Just maybe touching on coalition pacts ahead of the election. What does that suggest? That no single party will enjoy an outright majority?
Good morning, Duduzile and listeners. Yes, I think before we go into the details we need to differentiate between coalitions and alliances. At the moment, everyone is talking about coalitions, but in fact, we are talking about alliances. Alliances is the type of cooperation you get before elections, and only after the elections you are entering in coalition politics. Now, what is absolutely clear at this point is that we are into the most difficult election since 1994. And some people are saying that this is a 1994 moment for South African politics. And the second thing that is important is that in the wake of what I'm calling tipping point politics, we are seeing major changes on the political front, and we are looking at a reconfiguration of the political spectrum. Only a few statistics. In 2004, the ANC support base was 69.7% on national and provincial levels, and it dropped to something like 57+% in 2019. But then came the local elections of 2021, where the ANC nationally dropped in support to 47.5%. And many surveys are indicating the possibility that the ANC won't achieve an all-right absolute majority. In that sense, we are seeing a proliferation of political parties. We have seen parties negotiating with each other in the wake of the 2024 elections. The first big one was the National Dialogue on Coalition Governments, driven by the government in the name of the Deputy President Paul Mashatile. Then we had the Multi-Charter for South Africa involving the DA, the IFP, Action South Africa, and a few others. And now we had the Coalition Pact led by COPE. Now the latter is not big political parties that are involved. It is parties that have relative less influence in comparison to previous conversations. We think about COPE, we think about the African Independent Congress, the National Freedom Party, and so on. But this is, generally speaking, the context, and people believe that they can mobilize parties. We have seen a lot of new parties, for example, Ace Magashule's African Congress for Transformation, a few generals coming from the military that are dissatisfied, established the Africans Reclaim. We have Rise, Mzansi, and so on. So at the moment, our political processes are very dynamic, and it's very difficult to predict. But what is clear is that coalition politics will be becoming more and more important in the future, in the wake of the decline of support for the ANC.
Prof, I beg your pardon, you mentioned that some sectors of society believe that 2024 will be a 1994 moment for South African politics. In what sense, really?
Well, because they believe there is the potential for major change. And this stands against the backdrop of a political dispensation that are in serious trouble at the moment. If we look at the political economic and social challenges we are experiencing at the moment. And I can give you a lengthy analysis on that, but we can only refer to the state of local government, health, education, service delivery, ESCOM, and so on. And many people believe that this is a time for change. And we have already seen coming out of the 2021 local elections that it is possible to take the ANC out of government. It happened in 70 local governments where we have so-called hung councils. But what is absolutely also true is that we haven't found the so-called magic formula to get coalition politics to work in a functional way. But people believe that this is a kairos moment. They can get the ANC out of power. My take on it is that it's not going to be that easy. At the moment, the strongly supported analysis on surveys are indicating a support maybe just below 50, maybe going into the low 50, I would say 48 to 52. But we have seen the ANC losing support. Currently, they lost a seat in Makwasi Hills here in Northwest. They have lost about 10 seats in the northern parts of KZN against the IFP. They are currently not in control of a number of metros. There are problems for them in Limpopo. So I think it is a challenging environment. From there, the belief that other parties can make a difference, and from there, the momentum for coalition talks or alliance talks, bringing groupings together in order to see if they can get the support to take the majority away from the ANC.
You mentioned the myriad of problems that face the South African population. But these formations that come together in the name of either unseating the ANC or offering an alternative, what has been your observation in terms of how power sharing already works, right? If you take a look at the city of Tshwane, you take a look at Ekurhuleni, for instance, how is it going for us? And I guess that speaks to trust on the part of South Africans that should we go at a national level, can you trust that those you bring together or who have come together and are looking for your endorsement will actually carry out the mandate that you have given them?
You know, I think we are at the early stages of coalition politics. But looking at the composition of society, looking at the different interests, the identities, etc., I believe that coalition politics is going to be a reality. But at the moment, we are facing a problem. And what I am seeing is that when the ANC is taken out of power, it is as they are mobilizing against that coalition governments. And that is what we are seeing specifically in Tshwane, using SAMWU in a way, using COSATU in a way, destabilizing the environment, creating the opportunity for the provincial government to intervene. So I think there is a lack of trust. And my take on the success of coalition politics is that different parties need to come together. They must find common ground. But then, when the electoral processes are finished, we must leave the electoral democratic systems to take the decisions. Then you cannot go to the street and mobilize against these governments. So it's also a political culture we need to change. And it will be very interesting, and my own observation is, if the ANC is not going to obtain an absolute majority in the 2024 elections on a national level, we may see a very unstable environment. Already, I am picking up higher levels of instability. We have seen that in parts of the Western Cape, Swellendam. We have seen that with the taxi industry. You refer to Tshwane. We can also include the Nelson Mandela Metropole. we can include Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni, and so on. So the country, generally speaking, is becoming more and more unstable, and instability is not a good condition for democracy. And when we talk coalition politics, we are talking about a very sophisticated form of democracy. And I am concerned that we aren't ready for this at this point, and this may contribute to higher levels of instability within our society and politics.
Prof, the instability that you are worried about, where would the threat come from? You speak of if the ANC does not come into power, there may be instability. Where would that threat come from?
Well, that threat can come from different groupings. At the moment, and we need to consider that, we haven't got a clear-cut electoral system. We have a revised electoral act. And the revised electoral act was an attempt to accommodate individuals. And the individuals and organizations supporting the position of individuals within politics are dissatisfied with the adjustments and the revised legislation. And at the moment, and we are now, let's say, 8 to 9 months before the election, at this point in time, there's no clarity about the electoral system. Now we are going into an election, and there's not clarification about the rules of the game. And it will be very easy for certain political elites, and that's not only the ANC, not to accept the outcome. And the Constitutional Court may say, let's accommodate individuals on an equal level, A, B, C, and D. Or they may say, we are not going to accommodate individuals. We are going to continue with the existing system. Then individuals may feel uncomfortable. So the rules of the game is not clear. That's the first one. Secondly, the moment political elites are losing their position, and we think about the bigger support base of specifically the ANC within the regimes of the country, the political systems, it may touch on the positions of people in the existing system, and they may start mobilizing. Opposition politics may start mobilizing. There are also other socio-economic factors that can play a role in terms of the coming election. We are looking at the position of the ability of the economy to pay the SASSA grants, and we are talking about 20 million people. If you include the COVID grants, it's going to 28 million. We are talking about food security. We are talking about a number of issues, identity politics, that can contribute to high levels of instability and conflict. But with regard to the ANC, it is specifically the position of the political elites and loss of power and influence that may be a very important factor. Just looking briefly at Zimbabwe, it is clear that ZANU-PF lost at least 2 elections over the past number of decades under the leadership of Robert Mugabe. And some people are also questioning the latest election. But it didn't change the position of ZANU-PF. What happened there is the regime is keeping the government in place. So we need a free and fair election. And I know that this election is going to be extremely difficult, and I'm concerned that people may question the outcome of this result, especially if it is about narrow margins. That may be the case if I look at the current surveys we are looking at.
Sure. Prof, thank you very much for your contribution this morning. Professor Andre Duvenhage is a political analyst.